In 1964, the United States conducted an experiment. 3 PhD candidates, who had just received their degrees, were brought together, and they were instructed to develop an atomic bomb based on public library materials. The whole thing was called the Nth Country Experiment, to see how hard it would be for a non-nuclear country to design an atomic bomb based on public information. After just 3 years, the experiment was stopped. The physicists came close to finding the right solutions, from which it was clear that the experiment was a success. It turned out that any country with 3 really good physicists, not even geniuses, can design a working nuclear weapon. But if it's so easy to develop a nuclear bomb, then why isn't the so-called nuclear club expanding? Let's find out. A nuclear club is an informal name for a group of powers that have been able to develop, produce and test nuclear weapons of mass destruction. Under the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons of 1968, the old nuclear powers are considered to be the United States, Russia, the United Kingdom, France and China. Together with the UN, they contain the emergence of the new nuclear powers. But the path of the old nuclear club member states hasn't been an easy one either. It began more than 80 years ago. The Americans were the first to conduct a nuclear test, detonating the 20-kiloton Trinity bomb in New Mexico in 1945. Trinity was the result and crowning achievement of the famous Manhattan Project. A blindingly bright flash was followed by a heat wave, a shock wave of colossal power, leaving a mushroom-shaped cloud at the site of the explosion, which stretched 12 kilometers into the atmosphere. Thousands of meters of surrounding desert sand were transformed into a brilliant jade-green radioactive glass. The test was deemed a success. The scientists who had made the bomb were astonished. Physicist Isidore Ruby expressed concern that humanity had become a threat to all life on the planet and had upset the balance of nature. The test reminded Oppenheimer of a line from the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Test director Ken Bainbridge told Oppenheimer, "Now we are all sons of bitches." Just a few weeks after that, on the 6th and the 9th of August in 1945, the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed. Since then and up to the present day, the United States has been the only nation to use nuclear weapons for military purposes. In 1949, the USSR was the first to break the US monopoly on the atomic bomb by testing a bomb of 22 kilotons at the Semipalatinsk test site. Thus nuclear parity was achieved. In 1952, Great Britain exploded its bomb, followed by France in 1960, which tested it in the Algerian oasis at Rejgan. Then it was the turn of Asian powers. China tested it in 1964 near Lake Labnor, and India detonated it 10 years later in the state of Rajasthan. Curiously, the Indians hadn't recognized their nuclear status until 1998. At the same time, Pakistan, outraged by the behavior of its neighbors, tested 6 charges in the dungeons of Baluchistan province. And since 2006, the nuclear weapons of North Korea has become the West's headache. So to say, North Korea entered the nuclear club without knocking. And here it is, in March 2022, testing the Hwasong-17 intercontinental ballistic missile. Today, this 17th model claims to be the largest intercontinental ballistic missile in the world. Its estimated diameter is 2.4 meters, and its total mass with full refueling could reach 110 tons. The launch of the monster missile by North Korea has turned it into a blockbuster. Now let's look at the rhetoric of the powers. North Korea is positioning the missile test as part of a nuclear war deterrent force. 2 hours after the Hwasong flight, South Korea launched 5 missiles of its own, calling it a demonstration of its ability and willingness to respond and punish immediately. The US called the missile launch a brazen violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions and noted that North Korea risks destabilizing the security situation in the region. The United States will take all necessary measures to ensure the security of the American homeland, the Republic of Korea and Japanese allies, the White House said in a statement. Meanwhile, new UN sanctions against North Korea are not possible because of Russian and Chinese veto power. Japan's Ministry of Defense published a video of the missile's condensation trail and declared the current launch the most technically successful in North Korean history. The head of the Defense Ministry, Nobuo Kishi, particularly excited everyone. Calculations show that the range could be more than 15,000 kilometers, depending on the weight of the warhead. Thus, the entire US territory, including the East Coast, is within range. Now it's time to return to the composition of the so-called nuclear club. The US, Russia, Britain, France and China are on the list of old nuclear powers who are signatories of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The young powers India, Pakistan and North Korea have not signed. After the collapse of the USSR, Soviet nuclear weapons were also present in Ukraine, Belarus and Kazakhstan. However, these countries voluntarily gave up their arsenals. Some countries make their territory available to NATO for the deployment of nuclear weapons. These are Germany, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands and Turkey, which have no bombs of their own. Israel stands apart. The country neither confirms nor denies rumors about its arsenal. According to experts, the Israelis have been developing nuclear warheads since the late 1960s. South Africa used to have nuclear weapons too, but all 6 warheads were destroyed after the end of the apartheid regime. There is a theory that Israel helped the South Africans develop the bombs. Iran has been accused of trying to get its own weapons under the guise of independent nuclear power. In 2015, Tehran and the 6 of the US, Britain, France, Germany, Russia and China signed an agreement on Iran's nuclear program. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action implied the gradual lifting of sanctions in exchange for an end to potentially dangerous developments. The process is not without obstacles. At the beginning of 2022, the Federation of American Scientists counted around 12,700 nuclear warheads in the possession of 9 countries. About 90% of the weapons come from the USA and Russia. Here is a breakdown by number of how warheads are distributed in the nuclear club. Russia 5,977, US 5,428, China 350, France 290, UK 225, Pakistan 165, India 160, Israel 90, North Korea 20. But it should be remembered that no country discloses the exact number of warheads in service. Moreover, about a quarter of the world's nuclear weapons have been decommissioned but not dismantled. Now back to the question of how easy it's technologically to get into the nuclear club. So what does it take to make a nuclear bomb? There are 2 of the simplest nuclear warhead schemes, implosion and cannon, and there are also hybrids of both. The cannon one is considered slightly simpler. A single piece of uranium-235 is literally shot with a powder charge into a target of the same composition. The idea is that there should be at least 80% of this element in the piece, optimally more than 90%. Both pieces have subcritical mass, and therefore can't start a chain reaction with a nuclear explosion by themselves. However, their almost instantaneous approach allows them to quickly reach the critical mass needed to start a chain reaction with the parameters required for a nuclear explosion. The speed of approach of the 2 pieces, as in a cannon shot, is crucial here because, if it is too slow, the chain reaction will have time to heat the pieces and begin the process of their vaporization. In that case, the explosive power will be greatly reduced. The cannon scheme is simple. If you have uranium-235 of the required enrichment, any artillery factory will make the cannon itself. Such a bomb fell on Hiroshima on August 6 in 1945. The simplicity of making a warhead also has its downside. The critical mass needed for an atomic explosion is over 15 kilograms. In the Hiroshima bomb, the parts weren't perfected and there was even more uranium. The higher mass of the warhead doesn't just make it less compact. A far more serious problem is that the fissile material enriched in uranium-235 is very difficult to obtain. Natural uranium contains only 0.7% of isotope 235, with the rest being heavier and non-reactive uranium-238. In order to raise the concentration of isotope 235 to 80 to 90%, the USA, during the Manhattan Project, followed an extremely energy-consuming diffusion route. In this scheme, uranium is first fluorinated to uranium hexafluoride, then heated to 56.4 degrees Celsius, causing the hexafluoride to boil. As a gas, it is passed through a chain of membranes. The heavier uranium-238 is gradually cut off, resulting in an enrichment of the 235th isotope. The whole scheme is extremely energy inefficient. The American diffusion plant consumed 3 gigawatts of power, about as much as 3 large nuclear reactors or a dozen decent thermal power plants. As a result, the plant lost economic competition to Russian manufacturers who used centrifuges. They created an artificial counterpart of increased gravity as they spin, and the heavier molecules with uranium-238 settled down and the lighter uranium-235 stayed up. Uranium production using the diffusion scheme is so expensive that it's not used simply for financial reasons. Application of the gas centrifuge technology requires the highest technological level of the contractor. Let us explain using an example. In the 1990s, when the Iron Curtain fell and Russian fuel producers, now TVEL, were able to start supplying to the international market, it turned out that their fuel was objectively cheaper. Then the USA wanted to build its own gas centrifuges to compete with Russia on equal terms. It began in 1995. 16 years later, by 2011, it came to the first test run of a cascade of centrifuges. In the end, some of them collapsed rather spectacularly. After all, modern centrifuges have rotational speeds of 1,500 revolutions per second, the very cutting edge of human technology. It's not easy to achieve it in the short term. It takes decades of gradual improvement. It ended so sadly that the US didn't renew the license of the corporation that was working on all of this. As the result of closing down the gaseous diffusion program as too expensive and disrupting the centrifuge work, the USA hasn't had its own producers of nuclear fuel, much less its own production of weapon-grade uranium, for a long time. So it turns out that these technologies are available only to units. Iran, China, and a number of other countries have their own centrifuges. But China buys them from Russia. Other players originally imported the technology. Some countries have spent decades and very large financial resources on this technology. However, as we have already noted, there is one more scheme, not a cannon scheme, but an implosion one. It doesn't use uranium-235, but plutonium-239. The fundamental difference here is that plutonium can be produced without these two inconvenient conditions, either the first too expensive energy and financially diffusion facilities or the second prohibitively complicated centrifuge facilities. Moreover, its critical mass is about 6 kilograms, which makes it possible to create noticeably more compact nuclear warheads. Here, for example, is a ring of plutonium-239, 11 centimeters in diameter and weighing 5.3 kilograms. Made in the USA. That is enough plutonium to make an atomic bomb with an effective beryllium reflector. This type of fissile material is produced in a nuclear reactor where uranium-238 captures one of the neutrons and becomes plutonium-239. The truth is that nothing is easy here as well. If uranium-238 is immersed in the neutron flux from the reactor for a long time, there will be too much plutonium-240. It is formed when uranium-238, which has just absorbed a neutron, becomes plutonium-239 and immediately catches a second neutron, becoming plutonium-240. The latter gives too strong neutron background. And if it's more than 7% in plutonium for nuclear weapons, the probability of failure of the entire project rises sharply. After all, the implosion scheme implies an explosion compressing the plutonium element of the design, in case neutron background is too high and creates the conditions for a nuclear explosion. Even at the beginning of an explosion, the fissile material will heat up prematurely and evaporate before it's fully detonated. This will destroy the nuclear weapon itself, but won't produce the intended explosion. The result is a very expensive, but relatively safe firecracker. It turns out that the weapon's grade plutonium must be low in plutonium-240, namely less than 8%. This can be achieved by only exposing the uranium-238 to the reactor for a very short time. Technologically, these should be reactors that allow for the rapid loading and unloading of uranium-238 rods during operation. It's technically impossible to do this in conventional reactors. In theory, there is nothing unrealistic about creating a different type of nuclear reactor. Such a highly specialized weapons-grade one. In 1942, the Americans built the world's first reactor out of natural uranium, without enrichment. In order to moderate the neutrons to the speeds at which uranium will capture them best, they used a neutron graphite moderator, which was sawed on conventional woodworking machines. The graphite stack was reinforced with a wooden frame for strength. Nevertheless, someone has to design a reactor in which the uranium-238 rod can be inserted and removed quickly. Few people know how to design nuclear reactors to make them work. And, again, only a few countries have such scientific and organizational skills. And it's virtually impossible to do this covertly from other states. However, the inquisitive viewer may argue that a dirty bomb can be made without high technology. Theoretically, it's not a problem. You can take a mixture of certain chemical elements, which we cannot name as we have no right to show practical aids, fill it into tubes which are usually loaded with nuclear fuel, and put it into ordinary, most standard reactors for a year. Then take it out of there and stuff any simplest rocket or even an artillery shell with it. But you can't get any weapon of mass destruction that way. The number of victims from radioactive contamination won't be much higher than from the explosions of such weapons. It takes a long time to produce the necessary amounts of sufficiently dangerous isotopes, it is difficult to store them, and it cannot be done secretly. A couple of rods can still be made, and then they can be poured into shells without too much fuss. But not a single state in the world can covertly stuff thousands of rods with the necessary elements, put the production on stream and create hundreds and thousands of dirty bomb-type munitions. But what if we try to stuff a dirty bomb not with a special mixture of elements, but with spent nuclear fuel? It could be tried, but there would be two problems. First, spent nuclear fuel is most dangerous when it's noticeably hot, when not all of its most dangerous isotopes are burned out. But hot spent fuel is very inconvenient to place in any warhead. Again, such dirty bombs are of very little use. The main part of it consists of long-lived isotopes, emission of which is quite moderate. Even admixtures of shorter-lived elements don't help. Such spent fuel is dozens and hundreds times safer than the optimal mixture of chemical elements kept in a reactor for a year. So in theory, any country will retain such a dirty bomb capability as long as it has at least one nuclear reactor. But in practice, dirty bombs are ineffective in a military sense, and utterly suicidal in terms of PR. That briefly is how you can describe the cost of joining the nuclear club. Of course, in this video we haven't mentioned uranium mining, nuclear power, various nuclear reactor technologies and much more. But we will leave that for future episodes, if that is of interest to you. Let us know with your likes and comments whether it is worth developing. For now, thank you for watching and see you on our channel.